It's Black Friday, and that means it's time to check out the gaming laptop deals. We share the best deals on our gaminglaptop.deals website, and we'll be updating it regularly between Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So make sure you check it out with the link below to save money on your next gaming laptop. Alright, so first up on the gaminglaptop.deals website, we've got Lenovo's Legion Pro 7i at the top. So this was just added a few minutes before I sat down to record. Now, we have had this model on the website for a couple of weeks now, but it was for $2,000 US. So the price has dropped today by $100. And honestly, $1,900 for a good RTX 4080 gaming laptop is a pretty good deal. I recently ranked all 34 gaming laptops that we reviewed this year, and Lenovo's Legion Pro 7 was at the top of the list. It's just got good build quality, a nice screen, good performance, the software's good, and that nice RGB bar on the front. But yeah, $1,900 for a good RTX 4080 laptop, definitely worthwhile if that's the level of performance you're after. The full-powered 4080 in this laptop can handle pretty much any modern game, even at high settings, 1440p, no problem. Even 4K is possible, but you might have to add in some DLSS upscaling. Alright, next up we've got Lenovo's Legion Slim 5, and this is the 14-inch with OLED screen. And again, this is a pretty good price at 26% off. I think it was slightly lower maybe a week or two ago on Best Buy for like $11.50. So if that comes back, we'll definitely replace it, but for now, this is still a pretty good deal. Just be aware when you go to like these Lenovo links, we can't directly link to the 4060 model, so when you click the link, it'll bring up the 4050 config, and then on the customization page, you'll have to select the 4060. But yeah, this was my favorite 14-inch gaming laptop this year, and that's mainly due to that OLED screen, and it's 14.5 inches, so it's just slightly bigger compared to others. It's also the only 14-inch laptop with two M.2 slots, so if you need upgradable storage, it's a great option. And despite being 14 inches, the CPU and GPU performance is basically the same as the largest 16-inch model, so you don't have to go for the larger version just to get better performance, which I think is awesome. The main downside with it is all memory is soldered to the motherboard and can never be upgraded. So with that in mind, I would be looking to spend that extra money to upgrade from 16 gigs of RAM to 32 gigs, because I think that's definitely worth it in something that you're probably going to use for years to come. Alright, scrolling down on the page, up next we've got the ASUS Strix G16. So we've actually got this listed twice, one with RTX 4050 graphics and then one with RTX 4060 graphics. And the main difference between 4050 and 4060 is the 4060 has an extra 2 gigs of VRAM, so it'll be useful in newer games that are more GPU heavy, and based on what we've seen so far, that's probably going to be a trend that continues in the years to come, so the extra VRAM is probably pretty nice with the more expensive one if you can swing it. Not only that, but if I recall, the 4060 is like 24% faster in game FPS compared to the 4050, and that more expensive one does also have the higher tier i7 processor instead of the i5. Interestingly though, the cheaper model actually has double the SSD space, which is a bit weird, but otherwise same screen and same RAM. So $800 for an RTX 4050 laptop definitely isn't the best we've seen by any stretch. As you'll see, we've got some much cheaper 4050 options coming up. But again, when I ranked all 34 laptops, the Strix G16 was one that I put in S tier at the top, because it's just a great gaming laptop that worked well. We didn't have any problems with it. But as a result, it does have a bit more of a price premium compared to others, even though it's still what I would classify as a mid-range option. And in between the Strix G16s, we've got Acer's Predator Helios 300. So this is actually an older 2022 model. The RTX 3070 graphics will perform close to RTX 4060 graphics. But yeah, being able to get RTX 4060 power for just over $900 is a pretty good deal. I mean, the 4060 in that Strix G16 just below it, that's like $180 more. Though to be fair, with the 3070, you don't get features like DLSS 3 frame generation, because that's only available with Nvidia's RTX 40 series. But yeah, still a great laptop overall. I gave the Helios 300 a pretty good ranking last year. It was one of the better 2022 models at least. And the price has definitely come down recently. Alright, what else do we have here? Alright, so we've got Lenovo's LOQ 15, which I recently did a top 3 budget gaming laptop video on the main channel, and the LOQ was number 1 for me. Granted, I was mostly talking about the RTX 4050 config, because that was available for $700, and I think it might be even less now. Anyway, the point is, I think the LOQ is a great option. A good RTX 4060 laptop for under $1,000 is pretty decent in my books. And to get this one, you've got to use these 2 codes on Lenovo's website. The LOQ 16 is only, what is that? Like $35 more expensive. That's also sold through Lenovo. So the 16 has a slightly bigger screen, so it's 16 by 10, which means more pixels vertically, so just less bottom chin underneath. Looks a bit nicer. Otherwise, the laptop's basically exactly the same. But with this one, you're actually getting double the RAM, double the SSD, and a Ryzen 7 processor instead of Ryzen 5, so 8 CPU cores instead of 2. And you can get 6% off using our custom code JTDeal6. Honestly, that one is way more worth it compared to the LOQ 15, so now I'm kind of thinking I might go and remove that LOQ 15. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is still a good deal, but if you can get the 16 for just $35 more with those extras, that's definitely worth it. Another 4060 option, we've got Acer's Nitro 17. So generally speaking, gaming laptops with bigger screens typically cost more money. So the fact that there's a 17-inch model with RTX 4060 graphics for $1,000, again, pretty good deal, especially with 16 gigs of RAM and a 1TB SSD. Plus it's got a 1440p screen, which personally is definitely preferable at the biggest 17-inch size. I don't know about you, but 1080p at 17 inches, I can really start noticing the pixels. We've also got Lenovo's Legion Pro 5i, so this is another one of those models that I rated S tier in the ranking video, as I think it's just a great laptop. Now, this one is on Lenovo.com at the moment, and I think B&H for like $1,200, but yeah, if you get it on Newegg with this ZIP 1111 code, it's the cheapest we've been able to find so far. Now, I said RTX 4060 laptops under $1,000 were good, and this one is a bit more expensive than that. But at the same time, I think it's also a more premium option out of the 4060s that we have listed. But yeah, if you don't care about that and you just want, 4060 tier performance, you could absolutely get one of those cheaper options for closer to the $1,000 price point. It's going to perform about the same in games. It just depends if you want to pay for a better machine with more features. Alright, scrolling down, and we've got ASUS's Zephyrus G14 next. So this is another one of the more expensive 4060 models. And the reason here is this is a 14-inch gaming laptop, and the 14-inch models just typically cost more money. That's just what happens with tech. You cram good specs into something small and the price goes up. But hey, it's still 25% off. And the G14 was another model that we reviewed quite well this year. And although I personally prefer the Legion Slim 5 14-inch with the OLED screen, honestly, for most people, I think the Zephyrus G14 is probably a better all-rounder option. It doesn't have an OLED screen, but at least you can upgrade one of the memory slots. It's not just all soldered memory. Technically, it can go right up to RTX 4090 graphics, and those are also on sale at Best Buy. Same with the 4080, but we didn't list them here because I just think it's a bit too niche. Like, I'm sure there are a couple of people out there that want to buy that, but we try to keep the gaminglaptop.deals website, I guess, more general for most people, rather than putting a laptop on there that one person ever is going to buy. Alright, the ASUS TUF A15. This is an extremely good deal. I think this is the lowest price I've ever seen for a full-powered RTX 4070 laptop. And from memory, the 4070 is about 20% faster in games compared to the 4060, though they both still have 8 gigs of VRAM. Not only that, but this one isn't cheaping out with 8 gigs of RAM or a 512 gig SSD. You're getting double that here. It does have a last gen i7 12700H CPU, so 12th gen, but honestly, if you look at the performance difference between 12th and 13th gen H series, there's not really a difference. So yeah, this one is an absolute steal if you've got $1,000 and you just want to get the best game FPS for the dollar. The build quality of the TUFs is pretty decent, I would say. Personally, I think something like Lenovo's Legion series is a little ahead, but I mean, the TUF has come a long way since 2020. Last year, I did a video basically saying that people should buy the TUF A15, I think it was, instead of Lenovo's Legion 5, and the A15 is the exact same thing, just with an AMD CPU instead of Intel. So yeah, this is a great gaming laptop for $1,000. Alright, next up we've got HP's Omen 16 with RTX 4060 for $950, so under that $1,000 that I like to see. Yeah, there's not really much to say about this one. 16 gigs of RAM, unfortunately not a terabyte SSD, but still AMD Zen 4 7840HS 8-core CPU and full-powered 4060, it's not bad. But again, if you just want absolute best FPS, $50 more for that TUF F15, definitely the move. Otherwise, we've got Acer's Nitro 5 for the same amount of money as that HP Omen just above it. And it looks like they've both pretty much got the same GPU, same RAM, 1080p 165Hz screen, though the Omen's is slightly bigger at 16 inches, and 512 gig SSD. So the main difference is going to be the CPU. The Nitro CPU is last gen. In terms of like overall laptop chassis though, I think the Omen is a bit higher quality, and generally speaking, AMD based laptops usually have better battery life, so in this case the Omen might be the better pick between the two. But still, both are 4060 laptops under $1,000, so pretty good. And below that, we've got MSI's Katana 17. So we've actually had this one listed for quite a while now, and that was because at the time it was the cheapest 4070 laptop. But honestly, compared to that ASUS TUF F15 for $88 less, I'd probably go for the TUF TUF. Though that said, this one does have 32 gigs of RAM, so double, and that does cost something. It's also a bigger 17-inch screen, and like I mentioned earlier, generally speaking, it seems like those bigger laptops with 17 and 18-inch screens typically cost more money. So it could be an option for those that are willing to spend a little bit more compared to the 15-inch TUF F15 to get that bigger screen and double memory. Unfortunately, we didn't get to review this year's Katana. I think we covered last year's, or maybe it was the year before. Not sure how much it's changed since then, but it's definitely a step above like the GF series. But at the same time, I think the TUF build quality might be a little nicer. Alright, so here's the RTX 4050 Lenovo LOQ 15 that I was talking about earlier. So this was $700, but with this code on Newegg, it's $640. And again, in my top 3 budget gaming laptops video, this was number 1. The value just can't be beaten. Especially when you consider the fact that Lenovo's LOQ series has all these features that way more expensive laptops are just sleeping on. Like the LOQ has Advanced Optimus and G-Sync. And these are 2 things that even MSI's $5,000 Titan GT77 is missing. So yeah, just crazy features from such a budget-friendly option. And we've also got Lenovo's Legion Slim 5 just below it at $900 for an RTX 4060. Now, this was another laptop that I think I ranked in S tier, because it's basically just Lenovo's Legion 5 from the last couple of years, but for some reason they shoved Slim into the name. So it's actually got the same name as that 14-inch OLED one I mentioned earlier, but this one is 16-inch and it's not OLED. Basically just a Legion 5 from last year, but with newer CPU and GPU. So the only downside with this is I think it's a 45% NTSC screen, so the color gamut isn't amazing. But to be completely honest, when you're just playing games and stuff, it's not really something you notice. Yeah, it's definitely not the best screen, but I mean it's also $900 for what is otherwise an excellent gaming laptop. So the price is clearly lower due to that lower tier screen, so it's a bit of a compromise. You can definitely spend like $100 or $150 more to get the Legion Slim 5 with a higher quality screen. So up to you if you want to go that route. But for those with $900, I think this is a great option for full powered RTX 4060 performance. Especially if you're just going to hook it up to like a bigger monitor at home or something that's higher quality. Then in that case, you don't really care what the screen's doing on your laptop. You'd be happy to spend less on a cheaper laptop screen. Alright, below that we've got HP's Victus. So this is pretty much the cheapest brand new gaming laptop that I've been able to find in the last few months. $450 for an RTX 2050. Now that does only have 4 gigs of VRAM, but from my own testing, in 20 plus games, the RTX 2050 basically performs the same as an RTX 3050. So I consider them the same, except 3050 laptops generally cost more money. It does only have 8 gigs of RAM, but hey, this is literally a budget entry-level gaming laptop. It's for those that have less than $500 to spend and they want to play some games at a basic level. You're not going to be able to get much better than this. I'm pretty sure MSI have their GF63 with 2050 on sale, but it's $500. So $50 extra for what, in my opinion, is a worse laptop. So yeah, Victus, definitely a good option if you're on a very tight budget. And if you're not on a very tight budget, then there's Alienware's M16. So I mentioned at the start of this list, we had Lenovo's Legion Pro 7 for $1,900 with the RTX 4080. So this one is $200 more expensive, but it is also an Alienware. And we know Alienwares aren't typically cheap. We didn't actually get to review the M16 this year, so it's hard for me to compare them. But I have used other Alienware laptops, and they definitely are nice. The software has been garbage in the past, but they did actually put an update out while we were reviewing the X16, and that made it load way faster. Still, otherwise, in terms of just like managing the laptop, I do think Lenovo Vantage is better. And yeah, unfortunately, I can't really comment on performance, but just in terms of like RTX 4080 laptops, generally they are more expensive than this. So yeah, I suppose ultimately depends how much you're after Alienware specifically. Because personally, I'd save the $200 and go for the Legion, but that's me. And we also have the RTX 4070 config just below it. And honestly, I think this is a better deal in terms of the 4080 one. I mean, the 4080 is 22% off, and the 4070 is 30% off. And the reason I say that is until a couple of days ago, we had a Lenovo Legion Pro 5 with 4070 listed for the same price. And that was a B&H. Unfortunately, like 2 or 3 days ago, they increased the price by $50 to $1450, and we still kept it on the site, but you know, it was borderline removing it. And then the next day they boosted it up to $1,500. and I don't think they're going to reduce it for Black Friday, unfortunately, so you might have missed out on that. But the point is, it was a good RTX 4070 gaming laptop for $1,400, and that's the case here too with this Alienware option. Of course, again, you can definitely get cheaper RTX 4070 laptops, like that ASUS TUF A15 we saw earlier. But $400 to go from a TUF, which is more of a mid-range option, to an Alienware M16, which I'd consider to be closer to higher end. Plus you get the newer 13th gen CPU, HX as well, so more cores and threads, and the higher resolution screen, which probably also means that I suspect it's brighter and better color gamut. Not sure on that, you'd have to check the specs. The performance would probably be about the same, so again, if you want the best FPS per dollar, that $1,000 TUF A15 is hard to pass up. Alright, up next, what do we have? So many deals on this site. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if some of these have either gotten cheaper or been removed or replaced with other options by the time you're watching this video. So again, check out the gaminglaptop.deals website with the link below to see all of the current sales. Alright, next up we've got Acer's Helios Neo 16. So this one is with an RTX 4050. Now, we can get other RTX 4050 laptops for closer to $700, even under $700 in the case of the LOQ, but I think this one has a higher quality screen, plus it's also got an HX processor. And yeah, $800 for a full-powered 4050 in a decent chassis, not too bad. And it looks like we've also got the RTX 4060 version with higher tier i7 and double the SSD space with a higher tier screen for $1,050. Again, I did say before that under $1,000 is great for a 4060, so I don't think it's an amazing price in terms of a 4060 laptop, but again, I think the Neo 16 is a good mid-range chassis. The only concern would be RTX 4060 powering a 2560 by 1600 screen. You can definitely run modern games with good settings at that, you just might need to look at things like using DLSS and FSR. And below that, we've got MSI's GF63. So I always give this laptop shit because, let's be real, it's just not very good. The screen doesn't look great, the plastic flexes quite a bit, it looks pretty dated because I think they've used it for more than 3 years now. And when it first launched, it was like $1,000 to $1,100. It was just a ripoff. But now on sale for $600, I think it finally makes sense, at least for people that only have this much money and cannot go any further. Because if you spend like $40 more for that Lenovo LOQ with a 4050, that's a way better laptop with way better features. Definitely worth saving the little extra if you can. This is only here for people that want a 4050 and literally cannot spend any more than this. Apart from that, I wouldn't recommend the GF63 to anyone. And although it does have an RTX 4050, if I recall, MSI run it at a lower power limit, like 45 watts or something. So the other 4050s in like this Neo 16, they'll run at the maximum 100 plus watts, no problem. So basically the laptop has better cooling, so they're able to send it more power, which means better performance. So despite the fact that the spec sheet says RTX 4050 on both, the GF63 isn't going to perform as well as those more expensive 4050 options. So yeah, only worth it if you can't extend the budget anymore. Alright, up next is ASUS's Zephyrus M16. So this is another one of those more premium laptops that I put in S tier, so at the top of the list, when I ranked all 34 laptops that we reviewed this year. And $450 off is pretty nice. This laptop has been closer to $2,000 for ages. It did come down to $1,500 a few months ago, and now it looks like it's finally back for Black Friday. So yeah, again, if you're just after best FPS for the dollar, you can definitely save $500 and get that $1,000 ASUS TUF A15. But there's no denying that the Zephyrus is a better machine. It's much thinner and the build quality just feels nicer. Plus it's got a mini LED screen that I think looks great. The M16's also had some nice upgrades compared to last year. So they added in a third fan, which improves cooling and allows them to boost the GPU to a higher power limit than before. And it also has 2 slots of upgradable memory. Last year, it was only 1 with some soldered. And last year, it didn't have the mini LED screen. So some nice improvements this year. And this is definitely on the more premium, more pricey side for an RTX 4070 laptop. So depends if you want those extra nice to have features and just a nice laptop overall. Alright, up next is HP's Omen 17 with RTX 4080 for $2,000 at HP. Now, I think this is pretty good as far as 4080 laptops go, because as mentioned earlier, what do we have so far? Like the Legion Pro 7 for $1,900, and I think it was the Alienware for $2,100. So this one sits right in between at $2,000, which I think is reasonable, but at the same time, you can actually pick this up for I think $1,650, which is honestly quite a steal, and that's at eBay. So if you go to eBay and just put in like HP Omen 17 4080, it'll come up and you'll find it. The only reason we don't list it on this website is because it's sold by a reseller. Can't in good faith link to at the moment. I don't really want to name them or shout them out or anything. You'll see them listed on plenty of other deal sites out there, but we've just seen countless reports on the Gaming Laptop Deals subreddit of people having bad experiences with them, especially if you need warranty or they ship you the wrong thing. So yeah, definitely you can save a few $100s if you want to take those risks, but that's just not something that we want to link to on this site, even if you can save some money. We just don't want to be responsible for people having those sorts of issues with what appears to not be a great business. So up to you if you want to go and try and find that cheaper deal. I did actually ask HP how they're able to sell those laptops for so much cheaper than HP, and it seems like they're just able to go and buy a bunch at wholesale and then sell them for less. Which seems kind of weird. You'd think HP would have the best prices on their own laptops, but that's the reason why we don't link to it. Alright, up next we have ASUS's TUF A16. So this has constantly been going for $750 for the last week or two, maybe even more than that. And the Radeon RX 7600S is pretty much the same as Nvidia's RTX 4050, maybe slightly better. And it does also have 8 gigs of VRAM instead of 6, so that's a nice bonus for it too. Unfortunately, that does mean you don't get features like NVIDIA DLSS 3 frame generation because it's an AMD GPU, but hopefully AMD's FSR 3 with their version of frame generation starts coming out in more games and gets better, because at the moment, at least according to Hardware Unboxed who analyze the differences between both, DLSS 3 does seem to be better at the moment. It also has a last gen CPU, so this is basically the same as the 6800H, which was a good chip. A decent RTX 4050 option can be picked up for $700, so you're paying a bit more for the extra VRAM and the slightly better GPU. I'm kind of surprised it hasn't gone on sale cheaper for this, because like I mentioned, this used to be very attractive, but now that the 4050 options have come down a bit more, it's not quite looking as good. Who knows, maybe they will lower it a bit more. Again, you'll have to check the gaminglaptop.deals site out to find out. Alright, up next we've got our first RTX 4090, and the reason we just don't link to too many 4090s is because they're super expensive. But this is one of the best priced options we've found, and it's also in Lenovo's Legion Pro 7i, which as I mentioned earlier, is one of the better laptops that we have listed here. So yeah, great option if you're after top-end performance. And below that, we've got a few Acer Nitros. So this is another example of a cheaper 4050 laptop, $623, that's quite good. And this thing is absolutely going to destroy that MSI GF63, and it's only $23 more. So yeah, if you can get the extra $23, definitely worth it. It's also got double RAM compared to that, and the 4050 has a higher power limit, so it'll perform better in games. I think it had the same CPU. Anyway, just much nicer build quality all around, and definitely better. Below that, we've got Acer's Helios 16, so another RTX 4080 laptop, and as mentioned, I think $2,000 for a good chassis with a 4080 is a pretty good deal. Plus this one has a good screen, 32 gigs of RAM, terabyte SSD, i9 processor, lots of good specs there. The Nitro 16 for $1,250 is decent for a 4070, and I think kind of in between those higher end options we had, like the ASUS Zephyrus M16, and then the lower tier Katana from MSI. So solid mid-range option if you want a 4070. And I think the price is pretty reasonable compared to some of our 4060 options. It's about 20% more money than some of those ones that are around $1,000, and the 4070 gets you about 20% more FPS in games compared to a 4060. So not too unreasonable. And below that, we've got another 14-inch laptop, MSI's Stealth 14. So this one is a bit cheaper compared to the Lenovo Legion Slim 5 and the ASUS Zephyrus G14. And compared to both of those options, you can upgrade both of the memory sticks in this laptop, which is pretty cool. It has an Intel CPU, which performs similar to those AMD options in the other 14-inch laptops, at least in Cinebench, but the battery life is not as good compared to those AMD laptops. So if you want battery life, you're probably better off going for the G14 or Slim 5. I think the Slim 5 was only like, what, $30 or $40 more expensive, plus it has an OLED screen. Overall, I think MSI's Stealth 14 is a good option for what is the cheapest 14-inch gaming laptop currently available, especially if you want the option of memory upgrades. The speakers were also one of the best I've ever listened to all year. The only problem is they have them kind of like right down the front, so when you're actually using your laptop with your hands on the keyboard, they kind of get covered and then they don't sound as good. So a bit unfortunate to something that was otherwise pretty good. And then below that, we've got just another great RTX 4050 option at $640 for Acer's Nitro V, or 5, I guess. I guess it's the newer version of the Nitro 5. Unfortunately, we didn't get this one this year. I think it only came out in the last few months. And again, it's $40 more than that MSI GF63, and definitely a better laptop all round in my opinion. Below that, we've got another 4080 option. So this time it's $1,800, which so far is the cheapest 4080 laptop I've mentioned. But the reason for that is because you have to bring your own RAM and SSD. So it won't come with Windows installed or anything like that, which I think is fair because this is a laptop that can be water cooled. So it's probably more for the enthusiast anyway. And decent SSD and RAM, what's that going to cost you, like $100 or $200? So total all-in costs probably puts it around $2,000 for something that can be water cooled with a 4080. Pretty decent. And then below that, we've got what I believe is the cheapest RTX 4060 laptop in Gigabytes G5 for $667. Now, the main issue with this one is I think the GPU power limit is capped at 75 watts. So when you compare it to a lower tier RTX 4050 laptop with full power limit, the 4060 ends up performing not quite as good as a 4050, which sounds kind of weird because you would think 4060, it must be a higher tier, and it is, and it does still have the extra 2 gigs of VRAM, but due to the power limit difference, yeah, it just doesn't perform as well as 4050 options that can be picked up for the same price. So we have this one here for those that really do want the 4060 to get that extra 2 gigs of VRAM. But if you're not too fussed about that, today at least in today's games, there are better options like Lenovo's LOQ, which I think has nicer build quality and nicer features like Advanced Optimus, and its full-powered 4050 will outperform it in games. Plus, I'm pretty sure we had some for this price that had 16 gigs of RAM. So yeah, I would only really consider this one if you really want that 4060 for the 8 gigs of VRAM. And up next, we've got MSI's Vector GP68. So the way this site works is when we add new deals, they get added to the top. So now that we're at the bottom, it's the stuff that's been there for a while. But that said, this laptop continually gets cheaper. So we keep updating the price, but it keeps staying at the bottom. I don't know, I guess we could delete it and add it up to the top fresh. But yeah, fact is, under $1,500 for an RTX 4080, this is kind of insane for the level of performance on offer. So think about it. We had that RTX 4070 in the ASUS Zephyrus M16 for $1,500, so that costs more. But the RTX 4080 in this laptop performs about 55% better compared to a 4070 in a 20+ game average at 1440p. So kind of amazing in that regard. The main problem with this one that I pointed out in the review is the low quality 1920 by 1200 screen. So the color gamut just isn't quite as good compared to most other laptops at this price, and the more expensive 4080 laptops out there. The response time also wasn't amazing, and when you get RTX 4080 power, it kind of feels like a bit of a waste to run it at basically a 1080p resolution. So this one is more for those people that either don't care about the screen quality or you plan on like docking it at home and connecting a bigger screen that's going to look much nicer. Because in that case, you really don't care about the screen that comes with the laptop. And the screen definitely is fine. It's just not great. You're getting what you pay for here. So definitely a good option if you plan on connecting a screen and just want that RTX 4080 performance. And below that, we've got the ASUS TUF A15 for $1,000. Now, it might not look like the best deal, especially compared to the ASUS TUF F15, which was the same price with a higher tier 4070, but this one does have a newer Zen 4 CPU, which will also mean better battery life. So, bit of a trade-off, depends what you're after. Max FPS in games, or something that's still decent, but with more battery life. Yeah, again, $1,000 for a 4060. It's decent, but as we've seen, there are some better deals on this website at the moment. Ultimately, it all comes down to what you're after in your laptop. And we definitely have plenty of options on the gaminglaptop.deals website at the moment. Again, check it out with the link below to see all the latest sales. And if you need help deciding on which laptop to get, then check out this video next, where I've covered what I think are the best gaming laptops this year.